In the year 950, somewhere along the frozen fjords of Norway, roughly 40,000 people were settling in for another brutal winter. Not in castles, not in fortresses with stone walls and roaring fireplaces. No, they were cramming themselves into massive houses made of dirt, wood and grass. The temperatures outside would plunge to 30 degrees below zero. Blizzards would rage for days. The sun would barely show its face for months. And somehow, against every logical expectation, these people wouldn't just survive, they'd actually be warmer in fact than most people living in modern houses today. Here's how the Vikings engineered the perfect survival machine and what life was actually like inside it. Just a quick thing before we begin. If you find yourself listening to these regularly, go ahead and hit subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Also, I'd love to know where you're listening from and what time it is there. It honestly blows my mind when I read comments from people in London using history stories to fall asleep. It's still wild to me, so drop your city in the comments. All right. We're heading to Viking Age Scandinavia tonight, but hold on, get comfortable first, and I mean properly comfortable. Fluff those pillows, pull up that blanket, whatever you need to do. Trust me, once we get going, you're not going to want to move. Because where we're going, it's going to be quite a journey, so let's do this properly. I'm going to put you inside the experience. First person, you're there, you're living it, your eyes open to nothing. That's the first thing. Absolute darkness, not the comfortable darkness of your bedroom right now with maybe a street light filtering through the curtains or the gentle glow of a phone charger. This is different. This is the kind of darkness that feels like it has weight, like you could reach out and grab a fistful of it. You blink a few times, trying to remember where you are. Your face is cold. That's the second thing you notice. The tip of your nose, your cheeks, your forehead, all cold, but the rest of you, actually pretty warm. You're buried under a pile of animal skins and rough woolen blankets. Sheepskin. Maybe some goat. The wool scratches against your chin, but you don't care because it's keeping you alive. And then the smell hits you. Oh, the smell. It's not a bad smell exactly, or maybe it is and you've just gotten used to it over the past several months. It's a thick smell, layered. There's wood smoke, obviously. That's always there. It's in everything. Your clothes, your hair, probably your lungs at this point. But underneath the smoke, there's something else, something alive. Animals. Right, the animals. You can hear them now, the soft shuffling of hooves on packed earth, the occasional snort of a cow, the bleating of sheep somewhere in the darkness. They're here, inside the house, with you, because of course they are. Welcome to a Viking winter. You're lying on a raised wooden platform that runs along the wall of what has to be one of the strangest buildings ever constructed by human beings. A longhouse. They call it that for obvious reasons. This thing is long, somewhere around 40 meters from end to end, which if you're trying to picture it, is about the length of 4 school buses parked bumper to bumper, and the whole thing is maybe 6 or 7 meters wide. So basically, you're living in a very large wooden ship that someone decided to build on land and then bury under a mountain of dirt. The platform you're lying on is about 1/2 meter off the ground, which doesn't sound like much, but it makes all the difference, because the floor down below, that's just packed earth, cold packed earth, and cold air sinks. So by raising the sleeping and living areas up off that frozen ground, the Vikings created a sort of warm zone, a layer of slightly less miserable air that hovers above the worst of the chill. Clever, right? We'll get to more of that. For now, you're waking up and you're starting to make out shapes in the darkness. There's a faint orange glow coming from somewhere in the middle of the building. The central hearth, the long fire they call it. It stretches almost the entire length of the living area. This shallow trench lined with stones, and there are always coals smouldering in it. Always. Letting that fire go out isn't just inconvenient. It's dangerous. In the worst of winter, it could mean death. The stones around the hearth have been absorbing heat all night. They're doing what heated stones do, slowly releasing that warmth back into the air. It's not exactly central heating, but it's something. It's enough. Your eyes are adjusting now and you can see more of the interior, the 2 rows of massive wooden posts that run down the length of the building, holding up the roof. These things are thick, oak mostly, maybe some pine. They're the skeleton of the whole structure, and everything else is built around them. And the walls are wild. From where you're lying, you can't see outside because there's nothing to see through. No windows, not a single one. Glass basically doesn't exist here, or if it does, it's so expensive that only churches can afford it. The Vikings looked at the situation and made a choice. Windows are just holes, they figured. Holes let cold in. Cold kills. So, no holes. Problem solved. Instead, you get walls that are anywhere from 1.5 to 2 meters thick. Not wood, not primarily anyway. These walls are built from turf, blocks of earth and grass roots cut from the ground like giant bricks and stacked on top of each other in overlapping patterns. The grass roots hold everything together, binding the blocks into a solid mass. And all those little air pockets trapped in the soil. They work exactly like modern insulation. Same principle as the foam in your walls at home. Trapped air that doesn't move, doesn't transfer heat. It's a thermal fortress. That's what this is. A structure designed from the ground up to keep precious heat inside and deadly cold outside. But here's the thing nobody tells you about living in a Viking longhouse. It's not quiet. There are probably 30 or 40 people sleeping in this building with you right now. Extended family, workers, maybe a few thralls, which is the polite Viking word for slaves. Everyone's here. The head of the household, his wife, their kids, his brothers and their families, the hired help, the not-so-voluntary help. And somewhere in the back third of the building, separated by nothing more than a low wooden partition that doesn't even reach the ceiling, there are a dozen cows and twice as many sheep and goats. So, there's snoring, there's the occasional cry from a baby who doesn't care what century it is. Babies are going to wake up at inconvenient hours. There's the constant background noise of livestock being livestock, and underneath it all, the soft crackle of the coals in the hearth. It's actually kind of peaceful in a weird way, once you get used to it. The darkness isn't going to last forever. Somewhere above you, cut into the peak of the turf-covered roof, there's a small opening, a smoke hole. It serves double duty as a vent for all the smoke that's constantly billowing up from the hearth and as the only source of natural light in the entire building. Right now, it's covered with a wooden flap to keep the heat in and the weather out. But as the household starts to wake, someone will open it and a pale grey northern light will filter down into the gloom. That's your morning sun, a grey rectangle in a dark ceiling. Get used to it. For the next several months, that's about as bright as your life is going to get. You sit up slowly, careful not to kick whoever's sleeping next to you, your sister maybe, or your aunt. Privacy is not really a concept here. Everyone lives together, works together, sleeps together. There's something to be said for the arrangement, actually. All these bodies in one enclosed space generate heat. Human beings are basically furnaces. We burn calories and produce warmth. Put 40 of us in a well-insulated box and you've got a significant heating system running around the clock for free. The Vikings understood this. That's why they built their houses to contain whole communities rather than individual families. It wasn't just about social bonds and keeping the clan together, though that was part of it. It was practical thermodynamics. More bodies equals more heat equals survival. Heat. Someone's stirring near the hearth. One of the women, probably your mother or maybe the thrall who handles the morning cooking. She's coaxing the coals back to life, adding small pieces of dried wood, blowing gently on the embers until flames start to lick upward. The light grows stronger. You can see the smoke now rising in lazy curls toward the blackened rafters above. Those rafters are interesting. They're covered in soot, years and years of accumulated soot from the constant fire below. And here's the thing, that soot isn't just a cosmetic issue, it's actually protective. The smoke saturates the wood over time, killing off the insects that would otherwise bore into the beams and weaken them. It's like smoking meat, but for architecture. The whole building is being slowly preserved by the same smoke that's making your eyes water. Your chest feels tight some mornings. That's normal. Everyone's chest feels tight. The air quality in here is not great by modern standards. The smoke has to go somewhere before it finds its way out through that hole in the roof, and that somewhere is the upper portion of the room. There's basically a permanent layer of haze hanging in the air above head height. You learn to stay below it. Sit, don't stand. Lie down, don't sit up too fast. But you survive. That's the important thing. Outside, the wind is howling. You can hear it pressing against the thick turf walls, trying to find a way in. It won't. This house was designed to defeat that wind. The walls aren't flat. They're curved outward in the middle like the hull of a ship. The Vikings built these structures using the same principles they used to build their famous longships. Let the wind flow around you instead of hitting you head-on. And the entrance? Forget about finding a door on the end of the building where the wind would smash right into it every time you opened up. The doors are always on the long side walls, facing away from the prevailing winter gusts. And they're not just doors, they're an entire system. You don't walk directly into the main living space. First, you enter a small vestibule, like an airlock on a spacecraft. You come in from outside, stomp the snow off your boots, close the outer door behind you. Only then do you open the inner door and step into the warmth. 2 doors. 2 barriers between you and the lethal cold outside. The icy air never gets a straight shot into the heated interior. Engineering, right? Every single element of this building is part of a unified system designed to do one thing: keep the heat where it belongs. Speaking of heat, the fire's really going now. Flames are dancing in the long pit, and you can feel the warmth radiating towards you even from your spot on the raised platform. Someone's hanging a big iron cauldron over the fire from a chain attached to the rafters. Breakfast. Whatever's in that pot has probably been simmering since yesterday, a perpetual stew situation. You add ingredients when you have them, eat what you need, keep the pot going. Your stomach growls, not from hunger exactly, more from the anticipation of warm food, because warm food isn't just about nutrition here, it's about heat. When you eat something hot, that warmth spreads through your body from the inside. Every hot meal is a survival mechanism. Every steaming bowl of barley porridge or fish stew is another few hours of life. You swing your legs off the platform, your bare feet hitting the cold earth floor. Mistake. You quickly find your shoes, slip them on. Better. The floor is packed hard from generations of feet walking on it, but it never really warms up. Not in winter. That's why everything happens up on the platforms or gathered close around the fire. The household is waking up in stages, kids are stirring, someone coughs, a baby fusses and then quiets as a mother pulls it close for warmth and feeding. The livestock are getting restless too, anticipating their morning attention. The cows need milking, the sheep need to be checked, there's hay to distribute, water to haul. Winter mornings on a Viking farm are not leisurely affairs. But there's something else happening too. As you look around at all these people shaking off sleep and beginning their day, you notice something. Nobody looks miserable exactly. Tired, sure, a little rough around the edges, but there's a kind of determined energy in the air. These people know what they're doing. They've done it every winter for as long as anyone can remember. Their parents did it. Their grandparents did it. Survival isn't just a goal, it's a routine. The darkness outside won't lift for hours. This far north, this deep into winter, you might get 4 or 5 hours of something resembling daylight, a greyish twilight that passes for afternoon and then fades back into black. But inside this smoky, crowded, animal-scented building, life goes on regardless of what the sun is doing. Somewhere in the back of your mind, you're aware of just how remarkable this is. A few thin layers of wood and earth and grass standing between you and temperatures that could kill an unprepared person in hours. No electricity, no modern heating, no supply chain bringing in food and fuel from somewhere warmer. Just the accumulated knowledge of generations built into the very structure of the walls around you. Your bed is still warm from your body heat, that pile of skins and wool is calling you back, but there's work to do. There's always work to do. And honestly, you're grateful for it, because this is how you survive. Not by hiding from winter, not by wishing it away, but by building a life that works within it, by engineering solutions to problems that would kill anyone who didn't take them seriously, by wrapping yourself in community and routine and shared warmth. The Vikings didn't conquer winter by fighting it, they conquered it by becoming part of it. And right now, in this dark longhouse filled with smoke and animals and dozens of sleeping relatives, you're starting to understand exactly how they pulled it off. The fire crackles, the roof beams, creak overhead. Somewhere, a cow lows softly in the dim. Time to get up. You need to understand something about the building you're standing in. This isn't a house in the way you think of houses. This is a machine, a survival machine, and every single piece of it was put here for a reason. Let me show you. Walk with me toward the outer wall. Go ahead, put your hand on it. Feel that? It's not wood. I mean, there's wood in there somewhere, but what you're touching is earth, compressed, root-bound earth, turf, they call it, and there's a lot of it. This wall is almost 2 meters thick at the base. That's roughly the height of a tall man lying down. 2 meters of dirt and grass roots packed together so tightly that you couldn't push a knife through it if you tried. The wall gets narrower as it goes up, tapering toward the roof, which gives the whole thing stability, like a pyramid in a way. Wider at the bottom, narrower at the top. Physics doing what physics does. But here's what makes turf special. It's full of air, tiny pockets of air trapped between the soil particles, held in place by all those tangled grass roots. And air, when it can't move, is one of the best insulators that exists. Same principle behind the fluffy jacket you might throw on when it gets cold outside. Same reason your blanket keeps you warm right now. Trapped air. That's the secret. The Vikings figured this out centuries before anyone wrote down the science behind it. They didn't have words for thermal conductivity or R values. They just knew that houses built this way stayed warm. Experience taught them, generations of trial and error in one of the harshest climates on the planet. The ones who built poorly didn't survive to pass on their techniques. The ones who built well became ancestors. Natural selection, but for architecture. Now look down. See that line of flat stones running along the base of the wall? That's not decoration, that's engineering. Wood rots, that's the problem with wood. It's strong and versatile, and you can do almost anything with it, but the moment it touches damp earth, the clock starts ticking. Moisture seeps in. Fungi move in after that. Given enough time, even the thickest oak beam will crumble into nothing. So, the Vikings created a barrier, a belt of stones running the entire perimeter of the building, lifting the wooden frame just high enough off the ground to keep it dry. The stones don't rot, they don't absorb water the way earth does, they just sit there, doing their job, keeping the wood alive. Simple. Obvious once you think about it, but someone had to think about it first. The wooden frame itself is something else entirely. Look up. See those massive posts running in 2 parallel rows down the length of the building. Count them if you want. There are probably a dozen on each side, maybe more in a house this size. Each one is a full tree trunk, stripped of branches and bark, the base buried deep in the ground for stability. Oak, mostly, sometimes pine if oak wasn't available. These posts are the bones of the building. Everything else hangs off them. The roof beams span from post to post, creating the peaked shape you see overhead. Smaller poles and planks fill in the gaps, forming a solid decking, and on top of that decking, more layers, because nothing here is ever just one thing. First comes the birch bark. You've probably seen birch trees before. White bark that peels off in papery sheets. Beautiful stuff. Also naturally waterproof thanks to the resins in the bark. The Vikings collected this bark in large sections, laid it out across the roof, decking like shingles, overlapping each piece so water would run down and off rather than seeping through. A natural rain jacket for the whole building. On top of the birch bark goes the turf, same material as the walls, heavy blocks of earth and grass, 2 or 3 layers deep, weighing several tons when you add it all up. This is why those wooden posts need to be so thick. They're not just holding up a roof, they're holding up a small hill. But that hill does something remarkable. In winter, when the heat from the hearth rises and meets the underside of the roof, it doesn't just escape into the sky. The thick layer of turf holds it in, reflects it back down into the living space. The roof becomes a heat trap, a lid on the pot. Everything warm stays where it belongs. And here's the part that seems almost accidental, but probably wasn't. The grass on that turf roof doesn't die when you put it up there. It keeps growing, roots push deeper into the soil, new shoots emerge in spring. Over time, the roof becomes a living meadow, each blade of grass anchoring the turf blocks more firmly together. The building literally grows stronger as it ages. The roots weave everything into a single mass that wind and rain can't pull apart. From the outside, a Viking longhouse looks like a grassy hill. Walk past one on a summer day and you might not even realize it's a building. It blends into the landscape so completely that it seems like the earth itself decided to form a shelter, which in a way it did. There's something poetic about that, living inside the land instead of just on top of it. But poetry doesn't keep you warm, physics does. And this building is a physics lesson made solid now about those doors. You've already experienced the vestibule, that small unheated room you pass through before entering the main space, the airlock, but let's talk about the doors themselves. Notice how low they are. An adult has to duck to get through. That's not an accident. When you open a door, cold air rushes in. Cold air is dense, it sinks, it hugs the ground. By making the doorway shorter than a standing person, the Vikings cut off the top portion of that cold air column. Less opening means less cold getting in. Also, if you're an enemy trying to storm this place, you have to bend down to enter, which puts your head at a very convenient height for the axe of whoever's waiting on the other side. Defense and thermal efficiency in one design. The doors themselves are thick, planks of solid wood fitted together with such precision that light barely shows through the cracks, and they don't swing on hinges the way modern doors do. Instead, each door has 2 thick wooden pins, one at the top and one at the bottom that fit into holes carved into the threshold and the lintel above. The door rotates on these pins. No metal required, nothing to rust. When that door closes, it closes tight, a seal against the wind. But wait, if there are no windows and only 1 or 2 heavily insulated doors, how does anyone see anything? How do they breathe? Look up again, that dark rectangle near the peak of the roof directly above the hearth. That's the smoke hole, the leora they call it. And it's more complicated than it looks. There's a wooden frame up there, fitted with a cover that can be opened or closed using a long pole that stands near the fire. During the day, when you need light and ventilation, you open it up. Smoke pours out, daylight filters in. At night, or when the weather turns particularly vicious, you close it down to trap every bit of warmth you can. Managing that smoke hole is an art. Open it too wide and you lose heat. Close it too tight and the smoke builds up until you can't breathe. The sweet spot is somewhere in between, constantly adjusting based on wind direction, weather conditions, how hot the fire's burning. Somebody in the household always has an eye on it. Usually an elder who's learned through decades of winters exactly how to read the smoke and the weather. The smoke itself isn't entirely bad news. Look at those rafters again, the ones blackened with soot. That coating isn't just dirt, it's protection. Wood-boring beetles hate smoke. The chemicals in it kill them, or at least drive them away, and the constant heat and smoke drying out the wood makes it less hospitable for the fungi that cause rot. The building is essentially smoking itself the same way you'd smoke meat to preserve it. The process takes years, but it works. Some of these longhouses stand for generations, their timbers harder and more durable than the day they were cut. Everything connects. Everything serves multiple purposes. The smoke that makes your eyes water is also preserving the structure that keeps you alive. The door that's inconveniently low is also keeping out the wind that would steal your warmth. The grass growing on your roof is also binding the turf together. Nothing is wasted. Nothing is accidental. This is what survival looks like when failure means death, when there's no backup plan, no emergency services, no way to call for help if you get it wrong. You build it right or you don't build at all. Now, there's one more thing about this building that you need to understand. Something that seems obvious once you know it but catches most people off guard the first time they hear it. This house was designed by shipbuilders. Look at the shape of the walls. They're not straight, they curve outward in the middle, bowing out like the hull of a boat. That's not a structural weakness, that's deliberate. The Vikings spent half their lives at sea, building and sailing some of the most advanced ships of their era. They knew how water and wind moved around curved surfaces. A flat wall catches the wind head-on. A curved wall lets the wind slip around it. Same principle applies to water. Rain hitting a curved surface runs off. Rain hitting a flat surface pools and seeps through cracks. The Longhouse isn't just shaped like a ship for aesthetic reasons. It's shaped like a ship because ship shapes work. And think about it. A ship is also an enclosed vessel that needs to keep its occupants alive in hostile conditions, protect them from weather, keep them dry, maintain livable temperatures. The problems are the same whether you're floating on the North Sea or sitting on frozen ground in Norway, so the solutions carried over. The Vikings took what they knew about surviving at sea and applied it to surviving on land. The Longhouse is essentially an upside-down boat, keel pointing at the sky, designed to weather a different kind of storm. There's a metaphor in there somewhere about adaptation, about taking knowledge from one domain and applying it to another, about the way wisdom accumulates across generations, each one adding to what came before. But you don't need metaphors right now. You're standing inside the result. Warm. Alive. Protected by centuries of accumulated trial and error, encoded into every beam and stone and block of turf. Outside, the wind has picked up. You can hear it now, that low moan of air pressing against the walls, looking for a way in. It won't find one. The builders made sure of that. They thought of everything. They had to. Someone's calling for help with the morning chores. The livestock need attention. The fire needs feeding. There's work to be done. Always work to be done. But for just a moment longer, you stand there looking at the walls, the roof, the smoke-blackened rafters, seeing it all with new eyes. This isn't just a building. It's a statement, a declaration of intent. We will not freeze. We will not starve. We will not surrender to the dark and the cold. We have built something stronger than winter, and we will be here when spring finally comes. The Vikings didn't just survive in this climate, they won. And the proof is all around you, in every carefully placed stone, in every interlocking turf block, in every thick-timbered post holding up the weight of a living roof. You're standing inside a victory, a quiet one, the kind that doesn't make it into the sagas, but maybe the most important kind of all, the kind that meant there would be another generation to tell those sagas in the first place. Now come on, there's work to do, and frankly, you should probably go check on the cows, because those cows, they're not just livestock, they're part of the heating system. But before we get to that, there's something else worth noticing. The orientation of this building, it's not random. Nothing here is random. The Longhouse runs roughly east to west, with the main entrances on the southern side. This isn't because the Vikings cared about feng shui or had some spiritual attachment to compass directions. It's practical. In the northern latitudes, the worst winter winds come screaming down from the north. By placing the entrance on the south side, the building's massive northern wall takes the brunt of the assault. The door stays protected. And during those precious few hours of winter daylight, the southern exposure catches whatever pale sunlight manages to filter through the clouds. Not much, but something. Every bit of warmth counts when you're fighting for survival. The ends of the building, where the walls come together in those rounded curves, face east and west. Wind hits those rounded ends and flows around them instead of slamming flat into a surface that would shake and stress the whole structure. It's like the building is swimming through the winter, prow facing into the storm, stern trailing behind, everything streamlined for survival. This building is the accumulated wisdom of centuries, rendered in wood and stone and turf. And it works. Right now, with the temperature outside cold enough to freeze exposed skin in minutes, you're comfortable. Not toasty warm, maybe. Not like sitting in front of a modern furnace, but comfortable, alive. That's the miracle. Not any single clever feature, but the way everything works together. The thick walls and the living roof and the stone foundation and the low doorways and the vestibule airlock and the curved hull shape. Each element doing its part, each one essential. Remove any single piece and the whole system starts to fail, but get it all right, balance every element against every other element, and you get this, a building that can keep dozens of people and animals alive through 6 months of darkness and cold. The Vikings built an ecosystem, a closed loop of warmth and waste and work, all contained under one roof, all feeding into each other. The people keep the fire burning, the fire heats the air, the warm air rises to the roof and gets trapped there. The animals add their body heat to the mix. The smoke preserves the wood, the grass binds the turf, everything connected. And all of it, every beam and block and stone was put here by hand. No power tools, no cranes, just people and their animals and whatever they could find or grow or cut from the land around them. Makes you appreciate what they accomplished. These weren't primitive people fumbling in the dark. These were engineers working at the highest level their technology allowed. The wind howls outside. The fire crackles. Somewhere in the back of the building, a cow shifts its weight, and you're warm. That's the victory. That simple fact, you're warm. Now come on, the day's getting started and those cows need attention because like I said, they're not just livestock, they're part of the heating system and that's what comes next. Walk toward the back of the Longhouse with me, past the central hearth, past the raised platforms where people are starting to stir, past the wooden posts that hold everything up. Keep walking. You'll know when you've arrived. Your nose will tell you. There's a low wooden partition here, maybe waist high. Not much of a barrier really, more of a suggestion, a boundary marker that says on this side humans, on that side something else. You step over it and suddenly you're standing in a different world, or the same world, just a lot smellier. Welcome to the barn section, the FJOs if you want to call it what the Vikings called it, home to maybe a dozen cows, twice as many sheep, a handful of goats, and yes, there's a horse down at the far end, all of them under the same roof as you, all of them breathing the same air. Right now, in the grey pre-dawn murk, they're starting to wake up too. One of the cows turns her head to look at you, big brown eyes catching what little light there is. She makes a low sound in her throat, not quite a moo, more like a rumble, a greeting maybe, or a complaint. Hard to tell with cows. The smell is thick. There's no getting around it. Animal bodies, animal waste, animal breath. It's everywhere. It's in your nose, your mouth, probably soaking into your clothes right now. If you weren't raised with it, if you came from somewhere else and walked into this building for the first time, you'd probably gag. But you don't gag, because this is normal. This is Tuesday. This is just how everyone you've ever known lives. Animals inside with people. People inside with animals. The way it's been since before your grandparents were born. And here's the thing nobody talks about. It's warm here. Really warm. Warmer than the human section of the house, actually. The body heat from a dozen large animals packed into this enclosed space creates a temperature zone that would make modern heating engineers weep with envy. Think about it. A single cow produces somewhere around 3,000 to 4,000 BTUs of heat every hour. That's not nothing. That's like having a small space heater running constantly. Now multiply that by 12 cows. Add in the sheep and goats, each one a smaller but still significant heat source. Throw in the horse. What you've got is a living, breathing furnace that never needs fuel and never stops running. The animals generate this heat just by existing, by digesting food, by keeping their own bodies at operating temperature. They can't help it. It's what mammals do. And the Vikings, clever people that they were, figured out how to capture that heat and use it. The low partition between the living area and the barn isn't solid. There are gaps, some of them deliberate, some just the natural result of not sealing every crack. Air moves freely between the two spaces. The warm bovine breath from this end of the house mingles with the wood smoke from the hearth end, creating a circulation pattern that distributes heat throughout the whole building. And here's the physics part. The floor in the human section is slightly higher than the floor in the barn section. Not by much, maybe a foot or so, but that small elevation change does something important. Hot air rises. Everyone knows that. When the animals exhale their warm breath, when their bodies radiate heat into the surrounding space, that warmth naturally wants to go up, and up means toward the human living area. So the heat flows from cows to people, from sheep to sleeping platforms, from this collection of large warm bodies to the humans who depend on them. It's convection in action, a natural heat distribution system powered entirely by animal metabolism. The Vikings didn't understand the science. They didn't have words for convection currents or thermal mass or any of that, but they understood the result. They noticed that houses with animals stayed warmer than houses without. They noticed that families who kept their livestock inside survived winters that killed families who built separate barns, and they adjusted accordingly. What works, works. You don't need to know why. One of the sheep is staring at you now, the kind of blank, unblinking stare that sheep are famous for. You stare back. The sheep wins. They always do. The animals need care this morning. That's why you're here. That's why someone had to drag themselves off those sleeping platforms before the sun comes up. First, the milking. The cows have been standing in the same spot all night, which means their udders are full, painfully full, probably. You grab a wooden bucket and a three-legged stool, position yourself next to the nearest cow, and get to work. Milking is one of those skills that looks simple until you try it. There's a rhythm to it, a technique. You don't just squeeze, you compress and pull, working your way down each teat in a sequence that encourages the milk to flow. The cow doesn't mind as long as you do it right. She'll stand there chewing her cud, occasionally flicking an ear at a fly that isn't even awake yet, while you fill the bucket beneath her. The milk steams as it hits the cold wood. That's how warm it is coming out of her body. Living heat turned liquid. In a few hours, some of this will be drunk fresh. Some will be set aside to separate, the cream skimmed off for butter. Some will be cultured into skyr, that thick, sour dairy food that keeps better than fresh milk and provides protein through the long winter months when the cows stop producing. Nothing gets wasted here. Everything has a purpose. The straw beneath your feet is damp, not surprising. A dozen cows have been standing here all night doing what cows do. One of your jobs this morning is to muck some of this out, add fresh straw, keep the bedding manageable. The waste goes onto the midden pile outside, where it'll freeze solid until spring and then get spread on the fields as fertilizer. Even the poop serves a function. Even that isn't wasted. You move from cow to cow, bucket filling and emptying. The sheep get milked too, though not as thoroughly. Their yield is smaller, but their milk is richer, good for cheese. The goats are next. They're the ones most likely to try to kick over the bucket, so you keep your wits about you. While you work, the animals are eating. Someone was up earlier than you, someone who drew the shorter straw for morning chores, and they've already distributed hay to the livestock. It's piled in front of each stall, and the animals are working through it steadily. The sound of their chewing fills the space. That rhythmic grinding of teeth against dried grass. It's oddly soothing once you get used to it. This hay is precious, maybe the most precious thing on the farm when you think about it, because without hay, the animals die, and without animals, the people die. The whole equation falls apart. Every summer, while the days are long and the grass is growing, everyone who can hold a scythe is out in the fields cutting hay, then drying it, then stacking it in the barn section of the Longhouse packed tight to minimize spoilage. The amount of hay you harvest in summer determines how many animals you can keep alive through winter. Simple math with deadly stakes. A bad hay harvest means hard choices. Which animals do you slaughter early because you can't feed them? Which do you keep alive at all costs because they're your breeding stock? The decisions ripple out through the whole household, affecting everything from diet to economics to next year's survival odds. But this year the harvest was good. The haystacks are high, the animals will eat their fill all winter long, and there might even be some left over come spring. That's security, that's peace of mind, that's the difference between worry and something close to contentment. The horse at the far end of the barn isn't for eating, not usually anyway. Horses are different, more valuable for their labour than their meat. This one is a working animal, smaller than the horses you might picture from movies about knights in armour, more like a sturdy pony, really, but strong. Capable of pulling a plough through heavy soil or carrying a rider through deep snow. Right now, the horse is doing what horses do when they don't have to work, standing there, existing, producing heat, contributing to the household thermal budget without even trying. You finish with the goats and step back to survey the scene. The animals are fed, the milking is done. The worst of the overnight mess has been dealt with. The sky outside, visible through the barely opened smoke hole, is starting to shift from black to dark grey. Dawn is coming, or what passes for dawn this time of year, and you realise something. Your hands are warm. Not from the work, though that helped, from the animals themselves, from being in this space surrounded by large warm bodies that radiate heat like living stoves. You were cold when you stepped over that partition. Your fingers were stiff. Now they're flexible. Now they work properly. The animals warmed you up, just by being here, just by being alive. That's the deal, isn't it? That's the arrangement at the heart of this whole setup. The humans provide shelter, protection from predators, food during the months when nothing grows. In return, the animals provide milk, wool, eventual meat, labour, and constant steady warmth. Each side giving something the other needs, both sides surviving together when neither could survive alone. There's a word for that, symbiosis if you want to get technical about it, but the Vikings just called it life, just called it normal. They didn't analyse it, they lived it. Now you're walking back toward the human section of the house, leaving the warm animal smell behind, moving toward the wood, smoke smell that dominates the other end. The fire has been built up. The cauldron is hanging over the flames. Someone is stirring something in a smaller pot. Breakfast is coming. The partition between barn and living space is behind you, but the heat from the animals is still flowing, still mixing with the hearth warmth, still keeping the whole building at a temperature that won't kill anyone. The two heat sources work together, fire and flesh, flame and body heat, supplementing each other through every cold hour of every cold day. Some nights, when the temperature drops so low that even the turf walls seem to strain against the cold, someone will add more fuel to the fire, and someone else will throw an extra armful of hay to the livestock because well-fed animals burn hotter. It's all connected, all part of the same system. You could step outside right now, push through the vestibule, emerge into the frozen world beyond these walls, feel what -30 actually feels like against exposed skin. But why would you? Everything you need is in here. Food, warmth, family, work, rest. Outside is death. Inside is life. Someone hands you a bowl of something hot. You don't even look to see what it is. You just hold it, letting the warmth seep into your hands, breathing in the steam. Behind you, a cow makes that rumbling sound again. Acknowledgement, maybe. Or just cow noise. Either way. The fire crackles, the smoke rises, the animals settle into their morning routine. And somewhere in the back of your mind, you're grateful, not in a dramatic way, not in a way you'd ever put into words, but grateful nonetheless, for the walls that keep the wind out, for the fire that never goes cold, for the animals that share this space and this warmth and this life. Because without any piece of it, the whole thing falls apart. And without the whole thing, there's only winter, cold, dark, endless winter. But not for you, not here, not today. Today, you're warm. Today, you're fed. Today, you're surrounded by people and animals and work that needs doing and a world that makes sense, even if it's hard. That's what survival looks like when you're living it from the inside. Not heroic, not dramatic, just persistent, just warm enough, just fed enough, just alive enough to do it all again tomorrow. The day is starting. There's so much more to do. But first, a moment. You sit down on one of the raised platforms close enough to the hearth to feel its warmth on your face. The bowl in your hands is still hot, some kind of porridge thick with barley, maybe some dried berries mixed in. You eat slowly, savouring each bite, because hot food is a blessing, and because rushing through meals is for people who don't understand how hard it is to produce every mouthful. Around you, the household is coming to life. Kids are being roused from sleep, rubbing their eyes, complaining. Women are organising the day's tasks. Men are checking tools, making plans, arguing mildly about something that probably doesn't matter. The noise level rises. Someone laughs. A child shrieks. Not in distress, just in the way children shriek. One of the dogs by the fire stretches and yawns, then curls up tighter against the warmth. This is community, this is family, this is what it means to live so close that you can't help but know everything about everyone. You can't hide anything here. There's no space for secrets in a house this size. Sometimes that intimacy is suffocating. Sometimes you'd give anything for a room of your own. But when the wind is howling outside and the darkness seems endless, there's comfort in being surrounded by people. There's warmth beyond what the fire provides. You finish your porridge and hand the bowl to someone collecting them. Across the long space through the smoke haze, you can see the animals in their section. One cow has laid down. The sheep are clustered together, a woolly mass. The horse is still standing, probably asleep on its feet. They'll be there all winter. The cold outside would be fatal, so they stay. They share the space. They contribute their heat. There's something almost peaceful about it, the steady presence of the animals, the rhythm of their breathing. They anchor the household in something primal. Outside, the world is white and grey and hostile, snow piled against walls, wind finding every gap, screaming through valleys. But in here you're protected, insulated by earth and grass and animal warmth, the fire burning low but steady. This is what survival looks like, not a sprint, a marathon, a long, slow grind through dark months, doing the same tasks day after day, waiting for the world to thaw. And somehow it works. It works because every element is in place. Remove any piece and the whole thing collapses, but keep every piece working together and you get this, a warm space in a frozen world. You stand up, stretch, there's work to do. But for just this moment, standing by the fire, full of hot food, surrounded by family and livestock and warmth, you allow yourself to feel something like contentment. Not happiness exactly, that's too strong a word for this life, but contentment. The quiet pride of surviving another night, being part of a system that works. Someone's calling your name. Time to get moving. The day is waiting. Let's talk about what's in that cauldron. Because food in a Viking winter isn't just fuel, it's the difference between life and death. And everything about how you eat, what you eat, when you eat has been worked out over generations of people who got it wrong and didn't survive to try again. The big iron pot hanging over the fire right now has been simmering for days, maybe weeks. Nobody really knows when it started because nobody ever really empties it. This is the perpetual stew, the forever pot. You add things when you have them. You take things out when you're hungry. The fire never stops, and neither does the cooking. Right now there's probably some barley in there, some dried fish that's been soaking long enough to soften, maybe some root vegetables from the storage pit, onions, leeks, whatever's available. It all goes in, it all cooks down. The flavours layer on top of each other until the broth is thick and rich and tastes like everything and nothing at the same time. You've eaten from this pot every day of your life. So did your parents, so will your children. Someone hands you a wooden bowl and you scoop some out. It's hot. That's the main thing. Hot enough to spread warmth through your chest, down into your stomach, out into your limbs. You eat it slowly, not because you're savouring the taste, but because hot food is precious and you want to stretch out the warming for as long as possible. There's bread too. Flatbread, mostly. Dense stuff made from barley flour, maybe some oats mixed in, not the soft fluffy bread you might be imagining. This is the kind of bread you could use to knock someone unconscious if you swung it hard enough, but it fills you up. Carbohydrates that burn slow and keep you going through hours of cold work. Sometimes when times are harder or stores are running low, the flour gets stretched with other things. Ground peas, dried seaweed, in really desperate years, even pine bark gets mixed in. You eat what you have. Complaining isn't an option when the alternative is starving. But let's back up. Because what you're eating now, in the dead of winter, is the result of work done months ago. Work done when the sun was up and the world was green and death felt like a distant problem. Food preservation. That's the whole game here. That's the skill that separates the living from the dead. Start with the fish. During the summer and fall, when the cod are running, everyone who can hold a line is out on the water. The catch gets gutted on the shore, the heads cut off, and then the fish get hung on wooden racks to dry in the cold sea wind. No salt required, not for this. The air is dry enough, cold enough, windy enough to do the work on its own. What you end up with is stockfish, hard as wood. Literally, you could use it as a weapon if you needed to, but also incredibly light and almost indestructible. Stockfish will keep for years. Years. You could take it on a voyage across the ocean and it would still be edible when you landed on the other side. To eat it, you have to soak it for days. Water changes the hardboard back into something resembling fish. Then it goes in the pot, or you cook it some other way, and you've got protein in the middle of winter when nothing is swimming and nothing is growing. The oilier fish, the herring and the salmon, need different treatment. These get salted, packed in barrels with layer after layer of coarse salt that draws out the moisture and creates an environment where nothing can grow. Or they get smoked, hung in the rafters where the hearth smoke swirls, absorbing flavours and chemicals that preserve the flesh. Smoked fish tastes like this house smells, like wood smoke and animal breath and generations of cooking. It's not exactly delicious by modern standards, but it's food, it's survival, and after a while your taste buds adjust to the point where you actually start to like it. Meat gets similar treatment. In the fall, when the grass is dying and it becomes clear that you won't have enough hay to feed all the livestock through winter, decisions get made. Which animals live, which animals die. The ones marked for slaughter provide fresh meat for a few days, and then the serious work of preservation begins. Salting, smoking, sometimes both. The meat gets rubbed with salt, hung to dry, smoked over slow fires. Some of it gets buried in the ground where the cold temperature acts like a natural refrigerator. Some gets packed in barrels of whey, the liquid left over from cheese making, which has enough acid in it to keep the bacteria at bay. Nothing gets wasted. Blood becomes blood sausage. Intestines become casings. Bones get cracked for marrow. Fat gets rendered into tallow for lamps and cooking. Every scrap of every animal that dies feeds into the survival machine. The dairy situation is its own complex universe. During the summer months, when the cows and sheep and goats are eating fresh grass and producing milk, there's more than anyone can drink, so it gets transformed, churned into butter that can be salted and stored, curdled into skyr, that thick sour stuff that's halfway between yogurt and cheese, which keeps better than fresh milk and provides the same nutrients, pressed into hard cheeses that can last for months if stored properly. And the whey, that thin liquid that comes off during cheese making, that gets saved too, used for pickling, used for preserving meat, drunk on its own when other beverages run low. Every drop of everything gets used because waste is a luxury you cannot afford. Vegetables are the hardest problem. The growing season here is short, maybe a few months if you're lucky, and most vegetables don't preserve well. They rot, they spoil, they turn into mush. But root vegetables are different. Turnips, carrots, onions, these can be stored in pits dug into the cool earth, buried under layers of straw and dirt that keep the temperature stable. They won't last forever, but they'll last long enough to provide some variety in the middle of winter, some texture that isn't meat or grain or dried fish. Cabbage gets pickled in brine or whey, fermented until it's sour and tangy and full of acids that help with digestion. The process creates something that can sit in a barrel for months without going bad. Not pleasant exactly, but edible, and crucially full of nutrients that prevent the diseases that come from eating nothing but preserved meat and grain. Everything in this house has been worked for. Everything has a story. That sack of barley in the corner, someone planted those seeds last spring. Someone weeded those fields all summer. Someone harvested the grain with hand sickles, threshed it on the floor, winnowed it in the wind, dried it over fires, and stored it in rodent-proof containers. Every mouthful of bread represents hours of labour. The dried herbs hanging from the rafters, gathered from hillsides during the brief window when they were growing, tied in bundles, hung to dry, added to food not just for flavour but for medicine, for preservation, for the trace nutrients that keep bodies functioning. Even the salt is precious. Salt doesn't grow here. It has to be traded for, brought in from somewhere coastal where seawater can be evaporated. Every grain of salt represents someone else's labour, someone else's skill, transported over distances on ships and then overland to end up in your food store. This is what people don't understand about living in a place like this. Every bite of food in winter was earned during summer. Every calorie consumed during the dark months was stored during the light months. There's no running to the market when supplies run low, no next day delivery, no fallback plan. You preserved enough or you starved. Simple as that. The children know this from the time they can walk. They help with the work as soon as they're able. Gathering, carrying, stirring, learning the skills that will keep them alive when they're running their own households. This knowledge isn't written in books. It passes from hand to hand, mouth to mouth, generation to generation. You finish your bowl of stew and set it aside. Someone else will use it for the next meal. In the pot, the contents continue to bubble and blend. 2 meals a day. That's the pattern here. The first meal, the dagmal, comes sometime in the morning after the initial chores are done, usually leftovers from the night before. The stew that's been simmering all night, the bread that's getting a bit stale, maybe some dried fruit if there's any left. Quick fuel to get through the morning work. The second meal, the natmal, comes in the evening when the day's labour is done. This is the bigger meal, the social meal, the one where everyone gathers around the long fire and eats together. More stew, fresh bread if someone had time to bake, maybe some dried fish or smoked meat, possibly some butter to spread on things, or cheese or skyer. The 2-meal system isn't about scheduling, it's about fuel conservation. Your body only needs so much food, and spreading it out through 3 or 4 smaller meals would require more fire, more heating, more calories spent on preparation. 2 meals means 2 cooking sessions. Efficient, practical. Everything here is practical. Someone's offering you ale now. It's weak stuff, watered down, more about hydration than intoxication. Water here can't be trusted unless it's been boiled, and boiling takes fuel. But ale, fermented from barley, is naturally sterilised by the brewing process. Safe to drink, slightly nourishing, mildly warming. The children drink it too, the weak version anyway. It's safer than water and it provides a few extra calories. The stronger stuff, the ale that actually has a kick to it, that gets saved for special occasions, feasts, celebrations, moments when getting a bit drunk is acceptable, because the work can wait until tomorrow. And mead, honey, wine. The good stuff, that's rarer still, precious enough to be hoarded, brought out only when there's something worth celebrating, a wedding, a successful raid, the return of someone who was gone too long. Mead tastes like sunshine and sweetness, a reminder that somewhere beyond this cold, dark winter, flowers bloom and bees work and warmth exists. But that's not for today. Today is just another winter day. Food gets eaten, work gets done, the fire keeps burning, the stew keeps simmering. It's monotonous maybe. The same meals, the same routines, the same faces, but monotony means survival. Monotony means you figured out a system that works and you're sticking to it. Monotony means you'll probably still be here when spring finally comes. And spring will come. It always does. The days will lengthen, the snow will melt, the grass will grow again, the cycle will restart, but that's months away. For now, there's just this smoky room, this hot food, this community of people who know how to survive because their ancestors figured it out and passed it down. You're one link in a chain that stretches back centuries, and if you do your part, the chain will stretch forward too, into futures you can't imagine, into winters you won't see. That's what the food in that pot really represents, not just calories, continuity, the ongoing defiance of a people who refuse to let the dark and the cold have the final word. Somewhere across the room, a child is crying about something. A man is arguing with his brother about whose turn it is to chop wood. A woman is singing softly while she works, an old song that everyone knows. Life goes on, that's the whole point. Between meals, the work never stops, it just changes shape. The men, when not tending animals or maintaining the building, work on equipment, repairing tools, sharpening blades, fixing fishing nets. A man near the fire is bent over a piece of wood, using a small knife to shape it into something. The Vikings are makers. If they need something, they make it. If something breaks, they fix it. Metal is precious. Iron tools get passed down through generations, repaired and re-edged until nothing remains but a sliver of steel that still holds an edge. When something breaks beyond repair, the metal gets melted down, forged into something new. Nothing is ever really gone. The older boys are learning these skills right now, sitting near their fathers, watching careful hands demonstrate techniques, trying themselves, failing, trying again. No formal school here, just the endless practical education of watching and doing. And the women are never idle. That steady, rhythmic clicking you hear underneath everything else, that's the loom. One woman is working the large upright loom against the wall, passing the shuttle through warp threads, building fabric one row at a time. It takes forever. A single piece of cloth large enough for a tunic might take weeks. A ship's sail could take years. The wool has to be cleaned first, carded, spun into thread on drop spindles that women carry everywhere, working them in spare moments. The thread gets dyed with colours from plants and lichens, blues from woad, reds from madder, yellows from onion skins. Only after all that work does weaving begin. Every piece of clothing you're wearing represents months of someone's labour. The socks on your feet, the tunic on your back, all handmade, all precious. When clothes wear out, they get patched. When patches fail, the fabric gets cut into something smaller. Old tunics become children's clothes, old children's clothes become rags, old rags become stuffing for mattresses. The cycle continues until nothing remains. This is what scarcity teaches, the absolute refusal to waste anything that might have remaining use. The children are playing now, a cluster in the corner, some game with carved pieces and lots of arguing about rules, but play is always interrupted by work. A child old enough to carry can carry water. A child old enough to stir can stir pots. A child old enough to card wool can sit for hours preparing material for someone else to spin. You watch one of the younger ones, maybe 4 years old. She's attempting to use a drop spindle. Her hands are clumsy. The thread she's producing is uneven, but she's trying. In a few years, she'll be as skilled as anyone here. That's how knowledge survives. Not in books, in the hands and muscle memory of people who learned by doing. The fire needs fuel. Someone gets up to add wood, choosing pieces carefully. Hardwood for slow burning through the night, softwood for quick flames when you need light. Even the fire is managed with accumulated skill. Outside, the wind has died down. The building isn't creaking as much. The relative silence feels almost strange. Maybe this is a good time to go outside, to see the world beyond these walls, to experience what the Vikings are protecting themselves against. Or maybe it's better to stay here, by the fire, with the community that makes survival possible. Watch the woman by the loom for a moment, not the young one learning, the older one, the one whose hands move with the kind of speed that only comes from decades of practice. Watch how the shuttle flies through the warp threads, how the beater comes down with exactly the right force, how the pattern emerges row by row without her even seeming to look at it. She's the husfreyja, the lady of the house, and if you think that means she's just the headman's wife with a fancy title, you haven't been paying attention. See that ring of keys hanging from her belt? Those aren't decoration. Those keys open every chest in this building. The food stores, the silver, the extra blankets and clothes, the trading goods, everything the household owns, everything it needs to survive passes through her hands. She decides when the salt gets used. She decides how much grain goes into the bread. She decides who gets new shoes and who makes do with patched ones for another season. The man who sleeps at the head of the household, the one everyone calls the master, he might make the big decisions about trade and travel and war, but she runs the actual machinery of daily life. Without her, this whole operation falls apart, and everyone knows it. When her husband goes raiding in the summer, or trading in distant markets, or just travelling to meet with other families about land disputes, she doesn't sit around waiting. She takes over completely, manages the farm, directs the thralls, negotiates with neighbours, makes binding agreements about resources and labour. For months at a time, she is the authority, full stop. This isn't some modern idea projected backward onto history. The legal codes of this era spell it out clearly. A woman who manages a household has rights that would have shocked people in most other places during this period. She can own property. She can inherit wealth. If her husband treats her badly, beats her, neglects her, she can divorce him and take her property with her. That ring of keys isn't just a tool, it's a symbol of power. When a woman dies here, those keys often get buried with her, placed right there on her body as a marker of who she was and what she meant to the community. The husfreyja is teaching her daughter now, not just the physical motions of weaving, though those matter. She's teaching her how to think about resources, how to plan months ahead, how to make sure that when the last snow melts in spring, there's still food in the stores and fuel for the fire, and everyone is still alive. It's a different kind of education than what the boys get. The boys learn to fight and sail and work metal. The girls learn to manage economies. In a world where a man might leave for years at a time, or might die on a journey and never come back, those skills aren't optional, they're survival. But let's be honest about the full picture here. Not everyone in this longhouse is free. See that figure near the door? The one hauling water in from the vestibule? That's a thrall, a slave. You don't need to look closely to tell the difference. The clothes are rougher, the posture is different. There's a kind of watchfulness in the eyes that comes from never knowing when the next blow might fall. Thralls do the worst jobs, the heaviest lifting, the most unpleasant cleaning, the work that nobody else wants to do. They're up before everyone and asleep after everyone. They eat last and least. If there's not enough food to go around, they're the ones who go hungry. Some thralls were born into this. Children of slaves become slaves themselves, but many were captured, taken in raids on distant shores, monks from Irish monasteries, farmers from English coastlines, people who had lives and families before the longships appeared on the horizon. The Vikings are traders in human beings. It's an ugly truth that sits alongside their clever engineering and rich mythology. The same people who built these warm houses also tore children from their mothers and sold them in markets from Dublin to Baghdad. Here in this longhouse, the thralls sleep in the darkest corners near the animals. They eat the scraps after free people have had their fill. They work until their bodies break down, but the lines can blur a little in practice. A thrall who works hard enough, who earns enough favour, might eventually buy their freedom or be granted it as a gift. Children born to thralls sometimes get acknowledged by free fathers and raised with at least some privileges. And in the close quarters of a longhouse, where everyone breathes the same smoky air and eats from the same pot, a kind of familiarity develops. Not friendship exactly, the power imbalance is too real for that, but something, a grudging recognition of shared humanity. The thrall by the door is carrying water for everyone. The water will boil in the cauldron. It will become part of the stew that feeds the whole household. In that sense, the thrall's labour is woven into every meal, every moment of warmth, every hour of survival. This is the complicated reality of community here. Everyone depends on everyone else, free and unfree, men and women, adults and children. The hierarchy is real and enforced, but the mutual dependence is real too. Without the women managing the stores, everyone starves. Without the thralls doing the brutal labour, the work doesn't get done. Without the children learning skills, there's no next generation. Without the elderly sharing wisdom, the same mistakes get made over and over. The Longhouse forces this truth on everyone who lives in it. There's no private space to retreat to, no way to pretend that you're independent. Every day you see the people you need and they see you. The web of obligation and service and hierarchy is visible in every interaction. Maybe that's why the social rules here are so elaborate. So many customs about who sits where, who speaks when, who gets served first and last. These rituals aren't empty form, they're pressure valves, ways to acknowledge the hierarchy without constantly fighting about it. Ways to remind everyone of their place while still maintaining the cooperation that survival requires. The afternoon is deepening now. The grey light filtering through the smoke hole is starting to fade. Soon it will be truly dark outside, that absolute winter darkness that swallows everything. But inside, the fire is being built up. The cauldron is starting to bubble with what will become the evening meal. People are drifting toward the central hearth, the warmest and brightest part of the house, gathering for the natmal. This is the social hour, the time when work pauses and people actually talk to each other. Children are finished with their tasks. The women have stepped away from their looms. Even the men have put down their tools. Someone is tuning a lyre, a simple instrument, a few strings stretched over a wooden frame, but in skilled hands it can produce melodies that stick in your head for days. The player strums a few notes, adjusts a peg, strums again. Around the fire, stories are starting to flow. Not the big epic stories, not yet. Those come later, when everyone is full and the fire is burning bright. For now, it's just gossip, news from other farms, speculation about when the weather might break, complaints about lazy neighbours, and stupid decisions made by someone who isn't here to defend themselves. The talk is in Old Norse, of course, a language you'd find both familiar and strange if you could hear it. Some words are close enough to modern English or German that you'd recognise them. Others are completely foreign. The rhythms are different. The poetry of it, the way sounds layer on sounds, would take your ears a while to adjust to. An older man is holding court near the fire, telling a story about something that happened years ago. It might be true or it might not be. Nobody really cares. The point is the telling, the way his voice rises and falls, the gestures that accompany the words. He's entertaining everyone within earshot, earning his keep in a currency that matters more than silver. Stories are currency here. The ability to hold an audience, to make people laugh or gasp or lean forward in anticipation, that's a skill as valuable as weaving or smithing. The best storytellers get invited everywhere. They eat well, they receive gifts, they're welcome in any longhouse because they bring something precious, distraction from the endless grind of survival. The husfreyja is directing the distribution of food now, bowls being filled, passed around, the order of service reflecting the hierarchy of the household. The headman gets served first, then his closest relatives, then the others in descending order of importance. The thralls eat last, after everyone else is finished, getting whatever remains. You accept your bowl and find a place to sit. The food is hot, the fire is warm. Around you, people are talking and eating and existing in that particular way that humans have when they feel safe and fed. For just a moment, the endless work recedes. The constant calculations about survival fade into the background. There's just this: warmth, food, company, the fundamental things that humans need and that this building provides. The lyre player has started a real song now, something familiar judging by the way a few people are humming along. The melody is simple but haunting, minor keys and strange intervals that make it sound ancient even to ears accustomed to this era. Someone starts singing the words, then someone else joins. Then more voices, until there's a ragged chorus filling the smoky air. You don't know the words, but you know what this is. This is community asserting itself. This is people saying, through the act of singing together, that they're more than just individuals struggling to survive. They're a group, a family, a tribe. The darkness outside is complete now. Beyond these walls, there's nothing but cold and wind and the vast indifference of a winter that doesn't care whether you live or die. But in here, there's song, and that makes all the difference. The song ends and another begins, and somewhere in the transition, a child falls asleep against her mother's side. That's how it happens here. The evening blends into night, the fire burns lower, the songs get slower and softer, and one by one people drift towards sleep. But not yet. Not for a while. There's still more to this evening ritual. An older woman, one of the elders of the household, is speaking now, not singing, speaking in that particular tone that means she's about to share something important, a memory, maybe, a piece of wisdom, something she learned when she was young and has carried for 50 years. Everyone quiets down to listen. Respect for elders isn't just polite here, it's practical. These are the people who've survived the most winters, made the most decisions, learned the most lessons. Their knowledge is literally a survival resource. She's talking about a winter from long ago. A bad one, worse than this one, worse than most anyone can remember. The snow came early and stayed late. Animals died. Stores ran low. By the end, they were eating things that shouldn't be eaten, making decisions that still haunt the people who made them. But they survived. That's the point of the story. They survived because they stuck together, because they shared what little they had, because nobody tried to save themselves at the expense of everyone else. It's a story you've probably heard before, or something like it. These tales get repeated every winter, passed around the fire like shared bread. They're not just entertainment, they're instruction. This is how we survived. This is what we learned. This is what you need to know if you want to survive too. The children who are still awake are listening intently. They're absorbing these lessons the same way they absorb everything else, through watching and listening and remembering. No books, no writing for most of them, just oral tradition, generation to generation. The chain of knowledge that stretches back into darkness and hopefully forward into futures nobody here will see. When the old woman finishes, there's a moment of silence. Not awkward silence, respectful silence, the kind that says her words mattered and will be remembered. Then someone else starts talking, a different story, a lighter mood, something funny this time, a tale about a man who got drunk and tried to fight his own shadow, or a woman who accidentally traded her husband's best cloak for a pig that turned out to be pregnant with 12 piglets. The tension breaks, laughter bubbles up, genuine and warm. This is the rhythm of winter evenings, serious and silly, teaching and entertainment, all woven together. The darkness outside might last for months, but these people have learned how to fill it with something other than despair. You're getting tired now. The warmth of the fire, the weight of food in your stomach, the hypnotic effect of voices rising and falling in the firelight. Your eyelids are getting heavy. Around you, others are making the same transition. People are wrapping themselves in blankets, settling onto the raised platforms, arranging themselves for sleep. The conversations are getting quieter, more intimate, the kinds of things you say to the person lying next to you rather than the whole room. A few people will stay up later. Someone needs to tend the fire, make sure it doesn't go out and doesn't spread. Someone will keep watch, though against what exactly isn't clear. Wild animals, maybe, strangers, the thousand small things that could go wrong in the night. But you don't have that duty tonight. Tonight, you can sleep. Tonight, you can trust that someone else is keeping the watch, feeding the fire, maintaining the systems that keep everyone alive. You find your spot on the platform, the familiar hollow where your body has pressed into the padding over many nights. The blankets are cold at first, but your body heat starts to warm them immediately. You curl up, conserving heat. The smoke hole above is nearly closed, just a crack to let smoke escape. No stars visible, just darkness. The sounds of the household settle around you. Breathing, snoring, the occasional mutter of someone talking in their sleep, the soft sounds of animals in the back of the building, the crackle of the fire burning low but steady. This is what security sounds like. Not silence, never silence. This constant murmur of life, of other beings existing alongside you, each one contributing to the warmth and the sound and the feeling that you're not alone. You close your eyes, the fire paints orange shapes on the inside of your eyelids, your breathing slows, deepens. Tomorrow there will be more work, more milking, more feeding, more of the endless tasks, more cold to fight off, more darkness to endure, but that's tomorrow. Right now, there's just this, the warmth, the weight of blankets, the presence of other people. Right now, you're safe. Right now, you're warm. The fire crackles softly. The wind moans outside, unable to find a way in. Sleep comes like a tide, rising slowly, gently, and just before it takes you completely, you hear another voice, picking up another story, always another story. You wake in darkness, not because it's morning, it isn't. The fire has burned low, just a bed of coals glowing red in the long hearth, and for a moment you're disoriented. The sounds of the household are muffled. Most people are still asleep, their breathing slow and steady. Somewhere a child shifts and murmurs. But someone is talking. Your eyes adjust and you see them. A small group gathered near the warmest part of the fire, huddled close together. An old man is speaking. His voice is soft but carries in that particular way that practiced storytellers learn, filling the space without waking those who want to sleep. This is the deep night, the hours when the world outside is at its coldest, when the darkness presses hardest against the walls, when sleep doesn't always come easy, and for those who can't sleep or choose not to, there's always a story. You pull your blankets tighter and listen. The old man is telling a tale about a ship, a longship that sailed too far west and found lands that shouldn't exist, islands of ice and mountains of fire, strange people who lived without metal, animals so large they could crush a man without noticing. You've heard versions of this story before. Everyone has, but that's not the point. The point is the way he tells it, the pauses in the right places, the shift in his voice when danger approaches, the way he makes you see the fog rolling over the water, feel the cold spray on your face, hear the creak of timbers straining against unknown currents. This is what scolds do. They don't just repeat words. They create worlds. In the summers, when the men sail off to trade or raid or explore, the scolds often go with them. They're present at battles and negotiations. They witness history being made, and then they carry those stories back, shape them into poems and tales, and perform them in halls from Norway to Iceland to wherever the Norse ships land. A good skald is welcome anywhere. They bring entertainment, obviously, but they also bring news, information about distant lands and foreign kings, warnings about dangers along certain trade routes, stories of other families, other feuds, other triumphs and failures, and they bring the past. The old man telling the story now isn't making this up. Not exactly. He's drawing on tales that were old when his grandfather was young, stories that have been passed down through so many generations that no one knows anymore where fact ends and legend begins. The gods are in these stories. Odin with his one eye and his ravens, Thor with his hammer, Loki with his lies. They walk among humans, interact with them, help and hinder and judge. In the stories, the boundary between the mortal world and the world of gods is thin enough to see through. Sometimes the stories are about heroes, men and women who did impossible things, killed monsters, sailed uncharted seas, founded dynasties, died gloriously in battles that shook the world. Sometimes the stories are about ordinary people, farmers who made clever bargains, wives who outwitted cruel husbands, children who discovered ancient secrets. The tales teach lessons even when they don't seem to, embedding wisdom about honour and courage and cunning into narratives that stick in the memory. The old man's story has reached a crisis point. The ship is caught in a storm. The sail has torn. Men are being swept overboard. He describes the chaos with words that make you feel the deck lurching beneath you, the icy water closing over your head. Around him, his small audience is rapt. Even you, lying on your platform wrapped in furs, have stopped thinking about sleep. The story has captured you, pulled you out of your own concerns and into this other world where heroes struggle against forces beyond their control. This is the magic of storytelling, not supernatural magic, something more fundamental, the ability to take a bunch of sounds, nothing more than vibrations in the air, and use them to create experiences in someone else's mind, to make them feel emotions they wouldn't otherwise feel, to transport them to places they've never been. The Vikings understand this power. That's why scolds are honoured and rewarded, why great poets can expect hospitality in any hall, why the ability to compose verse is considered a gift from Odin himself. There's a hierarchy to this art. At the bottom are the people who can merely repeat stories they've heard, getting the basic facts right but missing the spark that makes a tale come alive. Above them are those who can perform well, who understand timing and emotion, who can hold an audience. At the top are the true scolds, the ones who can create new poems in the complex meters that tradition demands, who can take an event they witnessed and transform it into something that will be remembered for centuries, who can speak to kings and not merely flatter them but capture the essence of their deeds in words that will outlast stone monuments. The old man telling the story tonight isn't one of those. He's a farmer, like most people here, but he's a good storyteller, and in the long, dark nights of winter, that's enough. He keeps the tradition alive. He passes the stories on. He fills the darkness with something other than fear. The ship in his story survives the storm. Of course it does. The hero makes a choice, takes a risk, trusts in his own skill and the favour of the gods. The weather breaks. Land appears on the horizon. The crew, reduced and wounded but alive, guides the vessel toward shore. There's more to the story, but the old man is winding down. His voice has gone softer, slower. He knows that some of his audience is drifting off, lulled by the rhythm of his words. That's fine. That's how these nights go. The story will continue tomorrow, or the next night, or whenever sleep refuses to come again. You close your eyes. The coals pulse with dim red light. The darkness fills with half-formed images from the story, ships and seas and unknown shores. This is how knowledge travels here, not in books, not in schools, in the voices of people who remember, speaking to people who will remember after them, an unbroken chain stretching back into time beyond memory and forward into futures beyond imagining. The children who are sleeping now, the ones too young to stay up for the deep night stories, they'll absorb these tales anyway. They'll overhear them during the long evenings. They'll hear references and fragments and eventually complete versions. By the time they're adults, the stories will be as much a part of them as their own memories. That's how it works. That's how culture survives in a world without writing, without permanent records, without any way to save information except in living minds. Every person is a library. Every death is a potential loss of irreplaceable knowledge. Every birth is a chance to extend the chain. The pressure of that responsibility is invisible but real. When an old person dies here, there's mourning not just for the person, but for what they knew, the stories they never got to tell, the songs they never got to teach, the practical wisdom about fishing spots and weather signs, and the 100 small details of survival that lived only in their experience. And so people learn. Children learn from parents and grandparents. Apprentices learn from masters. Everyone absorbs what they can from everyone else, building up reservoirs of knowledge that they'll someday pass on. It's a fragile system. A single bad winter, a disease that takes too many people, a war that kills a generation of young men, and centuries of accumulated wisdom can vanish. The chain breaks, the stories are lost. Future generations stumble in darkness that their ancestors could have lit. But the system also has resilience. Stories spread, they're told in multiple halls, remembered by multiple people. If one version is lost, others survive. The most important knowledge, the really crucial survival information, gets embedded so deeply that it becomes instinct. The chain has backup links. Tonight, in this longhouse, the chain holds. The old man has stopped speaking. The silence that follows is different from the silence of emptiness. It's a satisfied silence, a full silence. Something has been given and received, and both giver and receiver are richer for it. Someone feeds the fire. Not much, just a few small pieces of wood to keep the coals alive. The flames flicker up briefly, casting dancing shadows on the walls, then settle back to a steady glow. Outside, the wind has shifted. You can hear it finding new angles on the building, probing different parts of the walls, but it's still shut out, still defeated by these turf walls and this living roof and this community that refuses to surrender to the dark. How many hours until dawn? You don't know. Time moves strangely in the winter months when there's no sun to mark the hours and the darkness stretches and compresses based on nothing but your own exhausted perception. But dawn will come. It always does. The pale light will filter down through the smoke hole. The household will stir. The animals will need feeding. The fire will need building up. The whole cycle will begin again. For now, though, there's just this. The warmth, the breathing of others, the echo of a story still resonating in your mind. You drift, not quite asleep, not quite awake. That in-between state where thoughts become images and time loses meaning. In your half-dream, you see the ship from the story. You see it cresting waves that never were, sailing towards shores that may or may not exist. The crew moves about their tasks, faces you can't quite see, voices you can't quite hear, and somewhere on that ship, or maybe standing on the shore, watching it approach, there's a figure. Could be anyone, could be you, could be someone from a saga that hasn't been composed yet. The figure raises a hand in greeting, or farewell, or warning. You can't tell which. The fire crackles. Reality bleeds back in. You sleep and wake again. This is how winter nights go. Sleep comes and goes in waves. The cold creeps in around the edges of consciousness. A noise startles you awake. A dream ends badly. Someone coughs on the other side of the room, but each time you wake, the Longhouse is still there, still warm, still full of breathing bodies, still holding back the darkness. The second time you wake, the fire has been fed again. Someone is always watching, always tending. The responsibility rotates, a silent agreement that ensures the hearth never goes cold. You can see stars now through the gap in the smoke hole, tiny points of light in a black sky. The Vikings navigate by those stars. They know their patterns, their movements, the way they wheel across the heavens in predictable arcs. On summer nights, sailors use them to cross seas that would swallow anyone who didn't understand the sky. But right now, the stars are just lights, cold and distant, beautiful in a way that has nothing to do with survival. Someone else is awake now. You can hear soft movement near the animal section, probably checking on a cow that's about to calve, or a sheep that's been restless. The livestock don't follow human sleep schedules. They need attention when they need it. The figure moves quietly through the darkness, guided by memory and the faint glow of the fire. They've walked this path so many times that they don't need light. Their feet know where the obstacles are. Their hands know what to reach for. This is intimacy you can't fake, the kind that comes from sharing a space for years, decades, generations. Everyone here knows everyone else's rhythms, knows who snores and who talks in their sleep, knows who wakes easily and who can sleep through anything, knows the small sounds that mean nothing and the small sounds that mean something is wrong. In the summer, when the days are long and people scatter across the landscape, working the fields and fishing the waters and sailing to distant shores, this intimacy fades. People become individuals again, pursuing their separate tasks, sleeping in separate spaces. But winter forces them back together, packs them into this one building, this one community, makes them remember that they're not alone, that survival is a collective effort, that the walls between people are as thin as the walls between this building and the killing cold outside. Maybe that's what the stories are really about. Not just entertainment, not just education, but connection. A way of saying, we're in this together. We share these tales the way we share this fire and this food and this warmth. The person checking on the animals has finished their task. They move back toward their sleeping spot, their footsteps almost silent on the packed earth floor. In a few hours, they'll be tired and someone else will take over. The rotation continues. You pull your blankets closer. The wool is scratchy but warm. It smells like smoke and lanolin and something else you can't quite name. The smell of home, maybe. The smell of this particular place, this particular collection of people and animals and memories. There's no word for homesickness in a world where most people never leave home, but there's a word for the feeling of safety, the feeling of belonging, the feeling of being exactly where you're supposed to be. And right now, despite everything, despite the cold and the dark and the endless grind of survival, you feel something like peace. Not happiness, exactly. That's too active a word for this state. Just acceptance. The understanding that this moment is enough. That the worries of tomorrow can wait for tomorrow. That right now, in this breath, in this heartbeat, you're alive and warm and surrounded by others who are alive and warm. The old storyteller has gone back to sleep. You can hear his distinctive snore, the one everyone jokes about when he's not around. Tomorrow he'll wake stiff and creaky, complaining about his joints, eating his porridge slowly while the younger people bustle around him. But tonight he gave something. He opened his mouth and let stories pour out, stories that will live on in the minds of everyone who heard them. That's not nothing. That's not a small thing. In a world where death is always close and winter is always coming, the act of passing down knowledge is an act of defiance. We will not be forgotten. That's what every story says underneath everything else. We lived, we struggled, we mattered, and when we're gone, these words will remain. The stars are still there, the fire is still burning, the wind is still trying to find a way in, and you're still here, still warm, still part of something larger than yourself. That's enough. For tonight, that's enough. Sleep comes again, gentler this time. No dreams that you'll remember, just darkness and warmth and the slow passage of hours. Somewhere on the other side of the world, the sun is shining. Here, the night stretches on, but dawn is coming. It always comes. And when it does, you'll be ready. For now, rest. Let the fire watch over you. Let the walls hold back the cold. Let the stories settle into your bones. Tomorrow has its own demands. Tonight, you sleep. Something wakes you. Not a sound exactly, more like an absence of sound, the kind of quiet that presses against your ears and makes you pay attention. You open your eyes. The Longhouse is dim. The fire has burned low, just coals glowing red in the darkness. Someone needs to add wood. You know this without even looking, but that's not what caught your attention. It's the silence outside. All night there's been wind. You've grown used to it. The constant rush and whisper against the turf walls, the occasional rattle when a stronger gust hits. It's been the background music of these winter months. Now there's nothing. You lie still, listening, breathing slow. Around you, the other sleepers shift and murmur. The animals in the barn end stamp and blow. The fire crackles softly, but from outside, nothing. After a moment you understand. The wind hasn't stopped, it's still out there, still blowing. But now, there's something between you and it. Something muffling the sound. Snow. Overnight, the storm that was coming finally arrived, and it's buried the house. You've seen this before. You know what it means. Right now, while you lie here under your wool blankets, snow is piling against the walls, climbing up the sides, covering the curves of the turf roof, filling every angle and corner until the Longhouse disappears under a white blanket. From outside, if you could see it, the whole settlement would look like a collection of low hills, nothing to indicate that dozens of people are sleeping underneath, just smooth mounds of white with thin wisps of smoke rising from snow-covered vents. This should worry you maybe, being buried alive, but you've learned better. The snow is actually helping. Here's something that took people a long time to figure out. Snow isn't cold. I mean, yeah, technically it's frozen water, but as insulation, it's one of the best materials nature provides. The secret is all the air trapped between the flakes. That air doesn't move, and still air is terrible at transferring heat. It's the same reason a fluffy wool blanket keeps you warmer than a thin, tight woven one. Right now, that layer of snow is working like an extra wall around the house, a thick one, maybe a metre or more by morning, and underneath that snow armour, the temperature of the outer wall stays stable, around 0, even when the wind is howling at 30 below. Think about that for a second. Outside, the cold is knife-sharp, the kind of cold that could kill you in an hour if you weren't careful. But here, snugged under the snow and the turf and the wooden frame and the bodies and the animals and the fire, you're warm enough to sleep without your cloak. The whole settlement has basically turned into a collection of snow caves, just bigger, more comfortable, with fire and food and community inside. Your ancestors figured out something important. You don't fight the snow. You don't dig yourself out the moment it falls. You let it pile up. You use it the same way you use everything else in this harsh landscape. By morning, the snow will have completely sealed the house, closed up any last gaps where the wind might sneak through, created a quiet cocoon around everyone inside. There's a reason people sleep deepest during heavy snow. You close your eyes again. Let the silence hold you. Sleep comes easy. When you wake again, it's morning, or what passes for morning this deep in winter. The smoke hole shows grey light, not the sharp blue of a clear day, the diffused glow that means clouds, or snow still falling. Someone has fed the fire. It's burning properly now. flames licking at fresh wood, heat pushing back against the cold. Around you, people are stirring. The husfreyja is already up. You can hear her directing the morning's work, her voice calm and steady, the same rhythm it always has. Today there's something different in the air, a kind of anticipation. And then you remember, Joel is coming, the midwinter celebration, the biggest feast of the year. You've been waiting for this. Everyone has. But first, before any of that can happen, someone needs to go outside. Not because anyone wants to, but because the animals in the barn end need fresh water. The ice on the pond needs to be broken. The woodpile needs to be uncovered and restocked. There are always things that require going out, no matter how deep the snow. You watch as one of the men starts preparing. Layer by layer, he builds up his protection against the cold. First comes the linen undershirt, thin and close to the skin. This is important. The layer against your body needs to wick moisture away. If you start sweating and that moisture stays against your skin, you're in trouble. The cold will find that dampness and steal your heat through it. Over the linen goes a wool tunic, heavy, thick, the kind of wool that's been prepared with the natural oils still in it. This layer traps warm air against your body, creates an insulating pocket that moves with you. Then the trousers, more wool, wrapped close at the ankles so snow doesn't work its way in, tied with leather thongs. Over everything goes the big outer layer, a cloak of sheepskin, fur side in, leather side out. The leather has been rubbed with tallow until it's nearly waterproof. The fur creates another layer of trapped air. This cloak weighs a lot, but it's worth every ounce. For the head, a wool cap that covers the ears. The ears are vulnerable. Frostbite can take them quick. For the hands, mittens, not gloves. Mittens keep the fingers together where they can share heat. Inside the mittens, a layer of wool. Outside, leather. For the feet, thick wool socks. Then leather boots stuffed with dried grass for extra insulation. The boots come up almost to the knee. By the time he's done, the man is nearly twice his normal size. He looks like some kind of shambling beast, more bear than human. And this is for a trip of maybe 100 yards. Break the ice, haul some water, come right back. That's how serious the cold is. He pushes open the inner door of the vestibule, steps through, closes it behind him. Then you hear the outer door open. A brief rush of cold air sneaks past the barrier. The door closes. He's gone, out into the white. You don't envy him. In a few days, it'll be your turn. Everyone rotates through the outside chores. It's only fair, but for now, you're grateful to be inside. While the man is out, others are working on different preparations. There's a small separate building about 50 paces from the Longhouse. You can barely see it on clear days. Today, with the snow, it's probably just a bump in the white landscape. That building is the smithy. It's not connected to the Longhouse. Can't be. The risk of fire is too high. One spark in the wrong place and the whole settlement could burn, and fire is always hungry for the wooden beams and dried straw of a longhouse, so the smithy sits alone, but it's designed to stay warm even in the worst weather. The trick is building down instead of up. The smithy is what some might call a grubenhaus, which just means pit house. Half of it is dug into the ground. The walls are formed partly by the earth itself. The floor sits maybe half a metre below the surface. This might seem like a recipe for dampness and misery, but actually it's clever. The ground never freezes as deep as you might think. Below a certain depth, the earth maintains a more or less stable temperature, not warm exactly, but not deadly cold either. By digging into that stable layer, the smithy starts with a baseline temperature that's manageable. Then you add a forge, a proper forge with bellows and a fire hot enough to work iron. Suddenly, that small underground space gets very warm indeed. The smith can work through winter, repairing tools, making new ones, the work that keeps a settlement alive. His underground chamber holds heat like nothing else. While the rest of the world freezes, he sweats over glowing metal. Other small buildings use the same principle: weaving workshops, storage cellars, sometimes even a small bathhouse with heated stones. These pit houses dot the settlement like burrows, each one a pocket of activity, a specialized space for work that can't be done in the crowded Longhouse. The man returns from his water run, snow caked on his shoulders and cap, ice already forming in his beard. He comes through both doors quickly, stamping his feet in the vestibule to knock off the worst of it. The cold rolls off him in waves as he enters. You can feel it from across the room. It takes several minutes by the fire before he stops shivering. That's winter outside. Brief, necessary, something to be endured rather than enjoyed. But inside is where life happens. And right now, inside is all about preparing for Joel. You've been aware of it building for weeks, the extra food being set aside, the special ale being brewed, the cleaning and organising that's been happening in the corners of the Longhouse. Joel is the hinge of the year, the moment when the darkness reaches its peak and starts to recede, when the sun begins its slow return. It's been celebrated here since anyone can remember, long before anyone thought to give the days names or count the years. The celebration will last 3 days, maybe longer if the ale holds out. There will be feasting. The animal that's been chosen for sacrifice will be killed and the blood collected in a special bowl. That blood will be sprinkled on the walls, on the altar stones, on the people themselves. It sounds strange to you maybe, but to everyone here it's as natural as breathing. A way of thanking the gods for getting everyone through the dark half of the year. A way of asking for their blessing in the light half to come. Then the meat will be roasted. All of it, shared among everyone in the Longhouse and beyond. Neighbours will travel through the snow to join the celebration. More bodies, more warmth, more voices raised in song. There will be oaths. This is a sacred time for making promises. People will place their hands on the sacrifice and swear to do great things in the coming year. To take a voyage, to make a marriage, to settle an old grievance. Oaths made at Joel are unbreakable. The gods are watching. There will be drinking, lots of it. Horns raised to Odin, to Thor, to Freyr and Freya, to the ancestors who came before, to the children who will come after. The ale flows and people speak what's in their hearts. Sometimes the truth comes out, sometimes tears, sometimes laughter. There will be games. Children will play at fighting, preparing for futures they can't yet imagine. Adults will compete in tests of strength and wit. The long darkness gives way to noise and motion and joy. And there will be stories. The scolds who've been telling tales all winter will save their best for Joel. The grandest sagas, the most heroic deeds, the gods themselves doing battle with giants and monsters. For 3 days, the normal rules bend. Enemies must keep peace. Workers can rest. Even the thralls will eat better and work less. It's as if the whole world holds its breath, waiting for the wheel to turn. You're looking forward to it. Everyone is. It's the light in the darkness, the promise that winter won't last forever. But today isn't Joel yet. Today is preparation, and there's work to be done. The Husfreyja has you helping sort through the stored food, deciding what can be used for the feast, what must be saved for the long, cold months still to come. It's a delicate calculation. Go too generous and you risk hunger later. Go too stingy and you dishonour the gods and the occasion. She moves through the storerooms with quiet confidence. She knows exactly how much dried fish remains, how much salted meat, how much grain for bread and ale. It's all mapped in her head, every barrel and basket accounted for. You follow her, carrying things when she points. Learning, though you don't realise it. This knowledge will matter someday. How to feed a household. How to stretch stores through a long winter. How to know when generosity is wisdom and when it's foolishness. The afternoon passes in work. pleasant work mostly. The anticipation of the celebration makes everything lighter. People are joking more than usual, singing snatches of songs. The children are barely containable. They know something good is coming. As the grey light outside begins to fade, the fire is built up high. People gather close. The evening meal is served. It's simple tonight. The good food is being saved, but no one minds. They're thinking about what's coming. An old man starts to speak. Not a story exactly, more like a memory. He talks about a Joel from his childhood, 60 winters ago. The snow was deeper that year, he says, the cold sharper, but the celebration was the warmest he can remember. Others join in, adding their own memories, their own stories of midwinters past. It becomes a kind of chorus, each voice adding to the others, building a picture of all the Joels that have ever been. This is what carries a community through the dark months. Not just the fire and the food and the walls, but this, the shared remembering, the sense that you're part of something larger than yourself, something that stretches back through generations and forward into a future you'll never see. Outside, the snow continues to fall, silent, steady, building up the insulation that keeps the cold at bay. Tomorrow there will be more digging out, more trips through the frozen white, more of the endless work that winter requires. But tonight there's this warmth, these voices, this anticipation. The fire crackles and pops. Someone adds another log. Sparks rise and disappear into the smoke-dark ceiling. You pull your blanket closer, listen to the old man's voice continue, his words mixing with the fire sounds and the animal sounds and the soft breathing of the people around you. Joel is coming. The wheel is about to turn. Sleep pulls at you. Gentle, insistent, the warmth of the fire, the fullness of your belly, the drone of familiar voices. You let yourself drift, half awake, half dreaming, somewhere between the story being told and the dreams starting to form. Tomorrow the preparations continue. The day after, or the day after that, the celebration begins. But for now, this moment is enough. This warmth, this quiet, this sense of being exactly where you're supposed to be. The old man's voice fades into the background. The fire settles. The night deepens. And you sleep. The day arrives soft and quiet, grey light through the smoke hole, the smell of something special cooking over the fire, a different quality to the morning, something you can feel before you even open your eyes. Joel, you've been waiting for this. The whole settlement has, and now it's here. You lie still for a moment, savouring it. The last quiet before the celebration truly begins. Around you, others are stirring, but slowly. No one is in a rush today. The usual urgency of morning, the immediate demands of survival have been set aside. For 3 days, time moves differently. The Longhouse feels different today. Fuller, somehow, even though the same people are inside. There's an energy in the air, a lightness. People move with purpose, but without hurry. Voices are gentler. Laughter comes easier. The husfreyja has been up since before dawn. You can see it in her eyes. The tiredness mixed with satisfaction. Everything she's been planning, all those careful calculations about how much food to save and how much to spend, it all comes together now. The sacrificial animal was chosen days ago, a boar, a good one, fat and healthy despite the long winter. It represents the best the community has to offer. You don't give the gods your scraps. The killing was quick, respectful, the blood caught in a wooden bowl. And then something happened that might seem strange to you, lying in your warm bed right now. That blood was sprinkled on the walls, on the altar stones that sit in the corner of the Longhouse, on the people themselves. It sounds dark, maybe, primitive, but standing there with your neighbours and family, feeling the cool drops on your skin, it didn't feel that way at all. It felt like connection, like you were all part of something larger, like the boundaries between humans and gods and animals and Earth had thinned for just this moment. Now the meat is roasting. The smell fills every corner of the house, rich and savoury. Your stomach remembers meals that didn't fill it, weeks of careful rationing, months of making do, and here, finally, is abundance. Not waste, never waste. Every part of the animal will be used, but abundance. Enough for everyone to eat until they're truly satisfied, maybe for the first time since autumn. People are arriving from other farmsteads. They trudge through the snow, bundled in their winter layers, breath fogging in the cold air. Each group that enters brings more noise, more warmth, more life into the space. Children find each other immediately. They've been stuck with the same playmates for months. New faces mean new games, new stories, new adventures. They race around the benches, getting underfoot, getting scolded, not caring at all. The old people settle near the fire. They've seen many Joels, 50, 60, 70 winters. Their presence is a kind of blessing, a reminder that survival is possible, that the community has endured before and will endure again. As the day goes on, the eating begins, not all at once. This isn't a single meal, but a continuous feast. People take food when they're hungry, return for more, rest, take more again. The cooking doesn't stop. There's the roasted boar, of course, cuts of meat that glisten with fat. The smell alone is enough to make your mouth water, to remind your body what abundance feels like. But there's also bread, better bread than you've had in weeks, made with the flour that was saved for this occasion, and cheese that's been aged since autumn, sharp and rich on your tongue, and the last of the honey, golden and sweet, drizzled over everything, and dried fruits that were packed away months ago, and ale. So much ale. The food tastes different during Joel, better somehow. Maybe it's the company. Maybe it's the relief of finally letting go of the constant worry about whether there's enough. Maybe it's knowing that you've earned this. Every person in this room has worked and sacrificed and endured to reach this moment. The drinking starts early and doesn't stop. Horns are passed from hand to hand, toasts are made, to Odin, who watches over warriors and wanderers, to Thor, who brings the thunder that breaks the ice in spring, to Freyr and Freya, who bless the fields and the wombs, to the ancestors who built this place and taught these ways. With each toast, you drink. The ale is warm and strong. It loosens something inside you. The tight knot of worry that's been there all winter. The constant low-level anxiety about whether the food will last, whether the cold will break through, whether everyone will make it to spring. For these 3 days, you can let that go. Someone starts singing an old song. One everyone knows. The melody is simple, passed down through more generations than anyone can count. Voices join in one by one until the whole house is singing together. Old voices and young voices, strong voices and wavering voices. The tune is simple. The words are about the sun returning, about light conquering darkness, about the wheel of the year turning as it always has and always will. You sing too, your voice mixing with all the others, becoming part of something larger than yourself. In this moment, you're not just one person singing, you're part of a chorus that stretches back through centuries. Every ancestor who sang this song at Joel, every generation that marked this turning point with the same melody. The song ends, another begins. The singing goes on for a long time, song after song, some cheerful, some solemn, some about gods and heroes, some about ordinary people doing ordinary things. The fire crackles and the voices rise and the night deepens around you all. Later, when the singing fades, the oaths begin. This is sacred business. A man stands by the sacrifice, places his hand on it, and speaks his intention for the coming year, to sail west to new lands, to marry the woman he's been courting, to settle the feud with the neighbouring farm, to have a son. Once spoken at Joel, these oaths cannot be broken. The gods have witnessed them. To fail would be to shame yourself and your family. So people choose their words carefully. They don't promise what they can't deliver, but they promise something. They commit. When your turn comes, you speak quietly. Something small but meaningful, something you've been putting off, something you need to do once the thaw comes. The words leave your mouth and become real. The oath settles into your bones. As night falls and the fire burns high and the ale continues to flow, you find yourself sitting on the bench watching the scene before you. This is the heart of it, you realise, not just the building or the fire or the food. This, the people, the together. You've spent months in this house, sleeping beside the same faces, breathing the same smoky air, eating from the same pot, working toward the same goal, survival, and you've done it, not alone. Never alone, together. The building is just a building, wood and turf and stone. Without the people inside it, it's nothing, an empty shell that the cold would claim in a single night. But with them, with all of them, from the oldest grandmother to the smallest child, from the husfreyja with her keys to the thralls who shovel the muck, the building becomes something else, a fortress. A ship sailing through the frozen months, a living thing that breathes and grows and endures. You think about the layers that have kept you alive, the wooden frame that holds everything up, oak and pine cut and shaped by hands that knew exactly what they were doing, the massive turf walls that trap the heat, layers of earth and grass 2 meters thick in places, a living shell around the living people inside, the birch bark that sheds the rain, keeping the wood beneath dry and sound, the snow that piles against the walls and adds another blanket of insulation, turning enemy into ally. And inside, the fire that burns day and night, months of gathered wood and harvested peat, feeding flames that never go out, the animals whose body heat rises through the house, turning livestock into living furnaces, the people whose warmth you've shared on the coldest nights, pressed close together when the temperature outside dropped so far below freezing that even the thick walls weren't quite enough. Each layer matters. Remove anyone and the whole system weakens. But together, working as one, they've held back the worst the winter could throw at you. You think about all the knowledge built into this place, generations of learning, trial and error, winters that taught hard lessons, people who paid attention and passed on what they learned. The whole house is a kind of memory, a physical record of everything your ancestors discovered about how to stay alive in a place that wants you dead. And now, 3 nights of celebration, 3 nights of feasting and drinking and singing and oath-making, 3 nights to mark the turning of the year, because that's what this is really about. The wheel has reached its lowest point, the longest night, the deepest dark, and now, slowly, so slowly, you won't even notice at first, the sun begins its return. Each day from here will be a little longer than the one before, a little brighter, a little warmer. The change will be so gradual that weeks will pass before you truly feel it. But it's happening, even now, even tonight. The light is coming back. Somewhere outside, beneath the snow and the frozen earth, seeds are waiting. They don't know it's Joel, they don't know anything, but something in them is stirring, the faintest memory of warmth, the promise of what's to come. Barley and rye, planted last autumn, sleeping under their blanket of white, waiting for the signal to grow. In the barn end of the house, a ewe is heavy with lamb. She'll give birth in the early spring, before the snow is fully gone, and that lamb will be the first new life of the year, a sign that the world is starting over again. Other animals will follow, calves and kids and foals. The settlement will fill with new sounds, the bleating of the young, the busy work of caring for them. The fields that lie dormant under white blankets will wake, first as patches of brown showing through melting snow, then as green shoots pushing up through softening earth. The rivers that run slow and icy will quicken, swelling with meltwater, rushing toward the sea with new energy. The birds that flew south will return. You'll hear them before you see them. The strange joy of birdsong after months of only wind and fire and human voices. The fjords will clear of ice. The boats that have been pulled up on shore, covered and waiting, will be launched again. Some will go fishing, some will go trading, some will go raiding. The world will open up after months of being closed. Horizons will expand. Possibilities will multiply. But not yet. Not for months still. For now, there's this, the fire's warmth, the sound of voices, the taste of good food and strong ale, the weight of the oath you've made and the promises others have sworn, the certainty that you belong here, in this place, with these people. The celebration will last 2 more days. There will be more eating, more drinking, more singing, games and contests for the children, stories and arguments for the adults. The normal rules of life will stay bent. The normal tensions will stay eased. And then it will be over. The visitors will return to their own farms. The daily work will resume. The careful rationing of food and fuel will begin again. The long, slow wait for spring. But something will have changed. The darkest point will be behind you. From here, every day is a step toward the light. You find yourself growing sleepy, the ale and the warmth and the full belly doing their work. Around you, others are feeling it too. The energy of the celebration is fading into something softer, gentler, people finding places to rest. The fire has burned down to deep, glowing coals. Someone will tend it through the night. Someone always does. The rhythm of the house continues even during Joel. You settle onto the bench, pull your blankets around you, the sounds of the house wash over you, familiar now, comforting, the low murmur of voices, the occasional laugh, the stamp and shuffle of animals, the crackle and pop of embers. This is what you'll remember, you think, years from now. Not the cold, not the fear, not the hunger that gnawed at you in the lean months. This. The warmth, the togetherness, the way an entire community worked as one to turn back the winter, the songs and stories and oaths and small kindnesses that made it bearable, that made it more than bearable, that made it, in its own way, beautiful. The Vikings never froze in their longhouses, not because they had magic, not because they were tougher than anyone else, but because they understood something important. You don't survive alone. You survive together, with walls built by many hands, with fires fed by everyone who can carry wood, with food preserved in autumn and shared through winter, with heat borrowed from animals who depend on you as much as you depend on them, with stories that carry knowledge from one generation to the next, with community. That's the real secret, the thing that kept the cold at bay. Not just engineering, though the engineering was brilliant, not just planning, though the planning was careful, but the human warmth, the trust, the knowing that if you fell, someone would catch you. Outside, the snow continues to fall, silent and steady, adding another layer to the blanket that covers everything. The settlement is invisible now. Just mounds of white with thin wisps of smoke rising into the dark sky. But inside, Inside there is warmth. Inside there is life. Inside there is this, right now, this moment of peace. At the turning of the year, your eyes grow heavy. The fire glow plays across the walls. Shadows dance and shift. The voices blend together into a gentle hum. Words losing their meaning, becoming just sound, just rhythm, just the pulse of the community breathing together. You did it. You made it through the darkest days. Spring is coming, not soon, but coming. And when it does, you'll be ready, rested, fed, strong, ready for whatever the thaw brings. For now, rest. Let the warmth hold you. Let the sounds of the house wrap around you like another blanket. Let your thoughts drift towards sleep like smoke rising toward the roof. The fire pops softly. Someone adjusts a blanket. An animal sighs in the barn end. Small sounds, peaceful sounds, the sounds of a household settling into sleep. The wheel is turning, the light is returning, and you are exactly where you're meant to be. Safe, warm, home. And wherever you are right now, in your own bed, in your own time, maybe you can feel some of that same peace, the same gratitude for warmth, the same comfort of being inside while the cold waits outside. Different walls, different fire, different people, but the same human need for shelter, for rest, for home. Sleep well. Dream of long fires and thick walls and the sound of voices singing together. Dream of snow falling silent on turf roofs. Dream of the wheel turning, the light returning, the world made new. Good night.